All right, let's just jump right in. Today, we're bringing you a high-energy explainer covering what is arguably one of the most intense, absolutely unforgiving entries in the entire Broken Tavern universe. We're talking about Volume 3, The Ghost of the Spire.
And, the whole thing really boils down to one incredibly provocative question. What actually happens when a solo adventurer brings a high-powered sniper rifle into a haunted, reality-bending spire? Well, as we're about to see, the answer is a brutal, unforgiving Iron Man survival run, one that pushes the absolute limits of tactical combat and leaves permanent, devastating marks on anyone foolish enough to try it alone.
I mean, just look at the sheer kinetic momentum kicking off the action here. We literally see our protagonist booting down heavy wooden doors, instantly launching us into the visceral, fast-paced chaos of this solo run. You've got a smoking revolver in one hand, this massive sniper rifle strapped to his back, and a multi-armed spectral nightmare just waiting in the green fog ahead. There is zero slow build-up here, guys. You are thrown straight into the deep end.
So, who exactly is the guy kicking down that door? Meet the chaotic neutral ranger. Basically, this is a highly mobile, solo-run lit RPG class specializing in high-precision, super high-stakes tactical combat. Knowing this gives us the exact framework we need to understand his, quite frankly, reckless combat swagger. He is not some heavily armored tank who can just absorb damage. No, he's a precision instrument built purely for speed and deadly accuracy.
Section 1. The Lone Ranger's Run. Now, what's really fascinating to me is the sheer, undeniable confidence on display. The Ranger literally storms the Spire, relying purely on his own abilities. He's holding up this shattered pocket watch, shouting out to an entity known as Elias, basically demanding he come down and face his rest. He is completely ignoring the massive risks of a solo dive into a dimensional nightmare, just leaning entirely on his own bravado to carry him through. Talk about swagger, right?
Section 2. Inside the Haunted Spire.
The building's getting defensive. I really want to emphasize this quote from the Ranger, because it perfectly captures how the environment inside the Broken Tavern is never just some passive backdrop. It's an active, aggressive threat. The Spire itself is literally a living antagonist. It's constantly reacting, shifting, and violently restructuring its own architecture just to crush the Ranger's presence.
Snap, crackle, the walls just erupt. Glowing green spectral chains burst outward. Dodge, roll. The Ranger has to move instantly. The floor liquefies into a sweeping stream of emerald energy. He actually plunges his combat knife right into the collapsing stone just to anchor himself. Reality is actively warping around him, and if he stops moving for even a fraction of a second, the architecture will literally consume him.
Section 3. High-stakes tactical combat.
And this brilliantly shows us how the combat mechanics actually work in the story. Instead of a messy, chaotic brawl, we get extreme, calculated precision. Notice that VAT-style red targeting reticle locking onto the stone gear right beneath him. The Ranger takes a completely calculated mid-air sniper shot to blast his way out of a freefall. It perfectly highlights the insane level of precision and stamina management required just to survive a single encounter in this hostile geometry.
Section 4. The White Mechanic Countdown.
3, 2, 1. That is literally all the time you get. A 3-second countdown. Try to imagine the absolute terror of a rapidly approaching wipe mechanic. When the Spire's ultimate defenses are triggered, it doesn't even bother fighting you. It bypasses standard combat entirely and simply initiates a localized harvest to delete you from the floor. Just look at this absolute gut punch of a moment. The text is screaming, wipe imminent, soul harvest complete in 3 seconds, as that terrifying multi-armed Wraith boss manifests in a swirling vortex of green spirits. But look closely at the Ranger, our once invincible, swaggering protagonist. He is suddenly missing his entire left arm. The sleeve is just blowing empty in the wind.
Section 5. Rule 10. Permanent Scars.
And this brings us to the cold, unmitigated dread at the heart of this series, the most brutal law of the universe. Rule 10, the law of temporal weight. Every tactical error demands a permanent price in flesh, blood, or sanity. Guys, there is zero plot armor here. The Broken Tavern has no save states. There's no magical healing potion, no temporal rewind that can undo this kind of damage. A mistake means a permanent amputation. It's as simple and as terrifying as that.
Let's actually look at how this consequence builds across the whole universe. On one side, we have the Ranger's brutal, clean amputation from the Spire's Wraith. But then, look at another character from the lore, Valerius. He is suffering a horrific, permanent physical transformation, where massive, jagged purple crystals are integrated directly into his flayed flesh. The scars might manifest differently depending on the floor you're on, but the permanence is exactly the same.
Let's take a second to really let the immutable reality of this system sink in. No resurrections, no temporal rewinds, no clean victories. The tavern always collects what is owed. This firmly cements the hardcore lit RPG Iron Man reality of the series. Surviving a run in the Spire doesn't actually mean you won, it just means you managed to live long enough to be permanently mutilated by your own mistakes.
And the wildest part? That consequence follows you long after the run is over. Focus on this super ominous warning taken directly from the credits. Warning: the tavern remembers you. The Spire's consequences aren't just isolated to that single floor. They followed the adventurer forever. They act as a literal, physical map of their failures that they have to carry into every future battle.
Which leaves us with this final, haunting question to wrap up our explainer. If survival in the Spire means leaving literal pieces of yourself behind, how much of the Ranger is even left to extract? Think back to that initial swagger, him kicking down the door at the very start, and compare it to his grim, permanently dismembered reality at the end. It completely reframes the cost of being a hero, doesn't it? Well, thanks so much for joining me for this dive into the ghost of the Spire, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.